All right, let's get right into it. Welcome to today's explainer. We are diving straight into a truly cinematic journey through history today. We're looking at a story that has absolutely everything: massive creation, sudden destruction, and, the relentless march of time. We're going to be unpacking the story of the construction of the Temple of Artemis, or as it's sometimes framed in Romanian historical accounts, Cu Povestea Construcției Templului Zeții Artemis. It's a tale that stretches across centuries, blending unbelievable human ambition with just absolute catastrophic tragedy. So let's get started. Okay, let's dive into this. Philo of Alexandria famously wrote, "When I saw the temple at Ephesus, the other wonders lost their brilliance." I mean, wow, that immediately establishes just how breathtaking this ancient structure actually was. It wasn't just one of the wonders. To a lot of people who saw it, it was the supreme marvel of the ancient world. Like, even the Great Pyramids or the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, they literally seem to fade into a fog when you compare them to the absolute majesty of Artemis's temple. Our first stop today is a wonder of antiquity, the Grand Illusion. More specifically, 120 years, the scale of ancient ambition. So to really understand this grand illusion, we have to talk about the staggering scale of their ambition. I mean, we're talking about a structure originally built around 550 BC. It was so big it almost felt like a mirage. We're using a French song to kind of frame today's explainer, and there's this one really poetic lyric, En marche au bord de l'illusion, walking on the edge of illusion. And honestly, for an ancient traveler walking into Ephesus, it must have felt exactly like that, like stepping completely out of reality. But the craziest part, it took 120 years to build. 120 years. Spearheaded by the architect Chersiphron and his son Metagenes, this was a relentless, multi-generational grind. Just stop and think about that for a second. The architects who drew up the very first plans, the stonemasons who cut the first blocks, they literally never lived to see it finished. It required a level of sustained community dedication that is just almost impossible for us to fathom today. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what all those 120 years of intense labor actually achieved. The dimensions are wild. It was 51 meters wide and 105 meters long, basically a massive footprint. And it was surrounded by this dense, almost forest-like perimeter of 127 towering columns, with every single one reaching an incredible 18 meters high into the sky. Inside, well, the historical sources tell us it featured a 2-meter-tall statue of the goddess Artemis, entirely covered in gleaming gold and silver. Plus, it acted as a massive art gallery. They had ancient statues of the goddess Nyx, paintings of the Amazons, who were the legendary founders of Ephesus, by the way. It was just absolute, unfiltered opulence. Which brings us to the next part of our story, the spark in the dark. But as is the case with so many ancient wonders, everything changed in a single, devastating instant. We kind of have to shift our tone here from this monumental human achievement to sudden, catastrophic loss. The fatal night was July 21st, 356 BC. Our framing song has this perfect yet heartbreaking lyric, C'est l'étincelle dans le noir, le dernier souffle de l'espoir. That translates to, it's the spark in the dark, the last breath of hope. And it perfectly captures what happened. A literal spark in the dark destroyed over a century of human achievement in just a matter of hours. That magnificent wooden roof, the golden statues, those towering columns we just talked about, all of it, entirely consumed by an inferno. And the man behind that spark was a guy named Herostratus. His actions actually gave birth to the concept of Herostratic fame. You see, he didn't burn this temple down for some grand political or religious reason. No, he was just an ordinary guy who set the most beautiful building in the world on fire for one incredibly twisted reason. He just wanted his name to be remembered in history forever. And, well, tragically, he succeeded. But there is a fascinating piece of cosmic irony to all this. Legend has it that Alexander the Great was actually born on this exact same night. The myth goes that Artemis was so preoccupied with attending to Alexander's birth that she simply couldn't be there to save her own temple. How crazy is that? Moving on to rebirth from the ashes, the eternal return. Now, what's really interesting about this is that the story of human ambition totally refuses to end in ashes. Let's pivot back to hope for a second. Going back to our song, it talks about an éternel retour, an eternal return. The people of Ephesus basically refused to let their great wonder die. In fact, Alexander the Great himself offered to fund the entire reconstruction out of his own pocket. But the Ephesians proudly turned his money down.
They relied entirely on their own civic pride and funded the whole thing themselves, kicking off this monumental rebuilding effort in 323 BC. And you guys, their resilience was staggering. The original temple was massive, right? But the rebuilt Hellenistic temple expanded the footprint to 69 meters wide and 137 meters long. The number and height of the columns stayed the same, but the overall scale was vastly increased. They didn't just rebuild what they lost, they resurrected it to be even grander and more ambitious than it was before.
Next up, Twilight of the Ancient Gods. But, as we all know, absolutely nothing lasts forever. Just as the song sings, Le temps s'efface, time erases. We enter this period of really rapid historical shifts, marking the beginning of the twilight for the pagan gods. The timeline of the temple's history became a total roller coaster. In 356 BC, we have that Great Fire. By 323 BC, reconstruction is underway. Fast forward a few centuries to the height of the Roman Empire in 162 AD, and Emperor Marcus Aurelius actually passes an edict to extend the annual religious festival for Artemis to a full month. So at this point, the temple is thriving. It's the absolute center of the ancient world. But then, fast forward again to 268 AD, and disaster strikes once more. Invading Goths attack Ephesus and leave the Grand Temple heavily damaged and sitting in ruins yet again. So you might be wondering what finally brought this wonder down for good? Surprisingly, it wasn't just the physical destruction. It was a fundamental cultural shift. The steady decline of pagan cults and the eventual Christianization of the Roman Empire really sealed the temple's fate. We even see this early cultural tension documented in the New Testament, actually. The book of Acts describes how the arrival of early Christian missionaries in Ephesus caused massive, sweeping riots among the citizens who were fiercely protecting their goddess. But ultimately, shifting beliefs and just general imperial indifference led to the final neglect and total abandonment of the sacred site. Which leads us to our final section, an eternal legacy, fragments of memory. Yet, despite all of that, the temple isn't completely erased from the earth. Like our song reminds us, on a garde nos souvenirs. We kept our memories. Even though this massive, beautiful structure fell into ruin, fragments of its physical memory survived. They got scattered all across the globe and became a permanent part of our shared human heritage. Let's trace where these surviving fragments actually ended up. First off, history tells us that a bunch of those magnificent ancient columns were transported all the way to Constantinople to be repurposed in the construction of the famous Hagia Sophia. Pretty incredible, right? Second, following some major archaeological excavations in the 19th and 20th centuries, incredible treasures, statues, and intricate bas-reliefs were packed up and moved to the British Museum in London as well as the local archaeology museum in Ephesus. And finally, step 3. Even today, the ancient site over in Turkey, with its scattered ruins, still draws thousands of visitors every single year who just want to come and stand exactly where the wonder once stood. And that brings us to the end of today's explainer. You know, seeing how a structure that took 120 years to build could just be burned down in a single night by one guy, then rebuilt even grander by a totally defiant city, only to be slowly scattered across the globe by the march of time, well, it leaves us with a pretty powerful thought. What are we building today that will truly stand the test of time? Are our modern wonders, our greatest technological achievements, destined to just become tomorrow's scattered ruins? It's a fascinating question about eternity and memory. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me today. I really hope this explainer gave you a vivid new perspective on the fragile yet enduring nature of human ambition. See you next time.